Alrighty, what's up everyone, my name's Nate Reacts and welcome back to the video. As you guys see by thumbnail title, today we are going to be doing the official 2024 album tier list video, where I am going to be reviewing every single album that I reacted to, whether it be off camera or on camera, that had released in 2024, and I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best. But yeah, other than that, before we start this video, I do want to say a few words just like I did last year. First off, I just want to say thank you guys so much for such an amazing year. It's absolutely crazy how good of a year it's been for the channel, especially the second half of the year. The first half, I will say, it was a little bit of a struggle. You know, I was going through some things with the channel where I kind of felt a little bit worried about the channel, whether or not it was actually gonna do well or not. And then the second half of the year happened and we gained over 5,000 subscribers in less than like a few months, which is crazy to think about. That's more than my entire channel has gotten over the past 3 years. So the fact that that happened was absolutely insane, and honestly I couldn't thank you guys enough. The fact that we can now say that we're on the final stretch to 10,000 subscribers is insane. I honestly just wanted to thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for, you know, all the love and support you guys show on the video. And yeah, next year is gonna be a big year. I will say that. I know that the setup is a little weird right now, but I am working on something that will really benefit the channel. So you guys are gonna have to bear with me with this makeshift setup right now. But yeah, I don't want to drag on this intro too long, so I'm just gonna say my final thank you. And yeah, other than that, let's just get into this. Alright, so right off the bat, we're starting off with the worst album of the year. Now, I will admit there has been a lot of bad albums, and I will say the first half of this year, especially from January up to maybe like March, we had some stinkers. And even throughout the second half of the year, we had some stinkers. But the first half of this year, like almost nothing but stinkers. But one of these albums just outshined the rest when it came to how bad it is, and that is the first album, Dear Joe by Jax. It's crazy to me how bad it is. This album is so bad that it left me utterly speechless. I genuinely have zero words. Even after all this time, I still cannot find the words on how to explain how bad this album is. Just for an example, this album has a 11 on AOTY, okay? On top of that, it has a song called Barbara, Your Husband is Gay. Neurospicy. It has a song called Epstein Didn't Kill Himself. A song called Adam Sandler. Oh, and how can I forget the legendary song, the second song off this album, Haktua. Do you see where I'm getting with this? Like, it's an unbearable album, and honestly, there is no way I can rightfully put it any higher than worst album of the year. Like, it is the only album that I gave a full-on 0 to. Alright, next up, we got Genre Sad Boy. Now, Genre Sad Boy is an album, a collaboration album between MGK, Machine Gun Kelly, and Trippie Redd. This is an album that was a surprise drop, I think. And yeah, it should have stayed in the vault, I will say. Now, these are two artists that in general I'm not a fan of, and I have talked a lot of crap about over the years on my channel. But going into this, for some reason expecting this to be half decent, especially since the sad boy genre is a dead genre from like around 2017, 2018, during the peak of like SoundCloud. So, you know, artists like Juice WRLD, XXXTentacion, Trippie Redd, Lil Skies, all them, Lil Uzi Vert. So, you know, I kind of expected this to just be like that, but it wasn't at all. There is genuinely not a single song on here that I can say is half listenable. It sounds like they went on YouTube, searched up non-copyrighted instrumentals in the style of like Juice WRLD and Trippie Redd, XXXTentacion, etc., and then took those off of YouTube and just rapped over them. That is the best way I can explain this album. It is one of those albums that came, didn't even last an hour, and just went. Not a single soul talked about it, and then just went. And yeah, for that, I'm gonna have to give that trash. Yep, next up, we got the man, the myth, the legend, Falling in Reverse with his album Popular Monster. Now this album is another album that I just genuinely don't really know how to explain. It's an album that is absolutely garbage. It's pretty much the best way I can explain this is imagine every edgy aspect of NF when it comes to the overproduced cinematic style, instrumentals, and take like Tom McDonald lyricism and put that in the album, and then sprinkle in some metal aspects, and that's pretty much what this album is. It is beyond edgy. It is so edgy that it is nauseating how edgy it is. It will have you going like this so many times. It is not funny. So for that, again, third worst album I reacted to this year. Gotta put that in trash. By the way, I know I'm complaining a lot, but that's just because we're going from worst to best. So trust me, the albums later on I will be praising a lot. So don't worry, I know it's gonna sound like I'm bitching and moaning this whole time, but I promise you it gets better. I swear it does. Next up, we got the woman, the myth, the legend, Katy Perry with 143. Now this album, off rip, I kind of figured it wasn't gonna be great, especially with all the controversy surrounding this album, but honestly I didn't really let that like fog my opinion on this album. I still went into this album in a non-biased manner, but honestly I came out of this just like, what the heck, bro. This album is an album that it starts out with a song called Woman's World, and honestly I don't even know how to even explain that song. It's like a woman empowerment song, but like very cringily done, and it's very generic and basic. What's weird about it is that the music video does the complete opposite of what the song is, because the song is about women empowerment, but the actual music video is all about sexualizing women, which is weird, and objectifying women, so it just doesn't really make sense to me. But every single song on here just makes no sense, especially the features. Having artists like 21 Savage and JID on here just makes no sense. For an album that, in her own words, was supposed to be a very personal album, it doesn't feel personal. It feels very formulaic, it feels generic, and it feels very, 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 very soulless. Every song on here just feels like it lacks any form of energy, and it's genuinely crazy on how underwhelming this entire album is. So again, trash album, can't really say anything else. But next up, we got another one, the man, the myth, the legend with the cult fan base, Kanye West with Vultures 2. I will say Vultures 1 was very bad, and going into this one I wasn't as optimistic about it, but I was a little bit more hopeful, because I thought to myself, you know what, all Kanye and Ty Dolla $ign can do is go up from here, you know, because maybe, you know, they learned from Vulture's mistakes, and they didn't. You know, they somehow doubled down on the mistakes and did even worse, because the first album, I will even admit, had some good songs on it, like Burn and I don't know, I don't know, oh, Stars something, it's something with stars. I think it's like the first track. That was a good song, and Burn was a good song. I think it's actually called Burn. It might not have actually been called Burn, but there's 2 songs on there that I thought were good. But on this album, it wasn't that. It was worse. Every single song on here was so badly done. It was so unfinished. It felt like a demo album. And then when you think it couldn't get worse, you realize that one of the songs is a complete YouTube rip. It was a leaked song that he created a long time ago that he didn't even bother just re-recording and mastering, but instead got the leaked version from YouTube, went to a YouTube to MP3 converter website and just downloaded it from there and uploaded it straight to, you know, streaming services and changing nothing. He didn't even bother doing anything to the song. And then on top of that, having another song where he uses AI of himself. Why you gotta be that lazy? You have to use an AI version of yourself for your album. That is crazy. So for that, again, trash album, man. Just utter trash. Alright, next up we got Kim Petra, Slut Pop, which I think is an EP, but I don't actually remember this album. But I gave it a very low rating, and my review was Timu Cupcake. There you go. So we're gonna put that in trash too, because I genuinely don't remember this album. Next up, we got Y2K by Ice Spice. Now, Y2K by Ice Spice, I honestly completely clickbaited with this one. Genuinely, when I heard she was releasing this album and I saw all the advertisements, I thought she was gonna go like the Pink Panthers route and make like this Y2K early 2000s pop, like similar to Pink Panthers. So I was actually excited for this because I thought maybe she would show a lot of versatility on this album. Lo and behold, that wasn't the case at all, and it was just a bunch of very mediocre New York drill and a lot of poop lines. I think there's about 3 or 4 poop lines in this entire album, which I don't know why there's that many poop lines, but there is. So for that, I'm putting it in the trash. Yeah, I don't really know how to explain that one. Like I said, there's a lot of trash albums this year. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot. All right, next up we got Paris Hilton. What's this album called? Paris Hilton Infinite Icon. Another album I don't remember, so we're gonna go to the page, and I gave it a 13 and said no thank you. Be for real with you, I don't remember this album also, but we're gonna also give it a trash because I genuinely don't remember. Oh, I remember this album. Okay, yeah. So next up we got Jason Derulo, New King. This album was just more of like a compilation album, more so than a new album. Like, I think there were new songs on it, but I think it mostly contained just all his old singles and he put them on an album. I don't like Jason Derulo. I actually hate him and I hate his music, outside of What You Say. So yeah, this one's also trash. I genuinely, I don't care for this album, and I've never cared for him, so there was no way I was actually gonna give that a good rating. Hey guys, remember when I said Vultures 2 was just a worse version of Vultures 1? Well, next up we got Vultures 1. This is also a very trash album. It's better than Vultures 2, but still really bad. I don't know, Vultures 2 is worse, but it's just, this one's really bad. Like, at first I was like, it's like whatever, but then the more I listened to it, the more I realized, yeah, no, this is worse crap. It's also like very similar to Vultures 2, which is weird because Vultures 2 comes afterward. You would think that there would be good songs on it, but for the most part, outside of 2 songs, which was Stars and Burn, I was correct. The rest of the songs are very boring. Most of the songs run from boring to feeling very unfinished to just being weirdly anti-Semitic. So yeah, that is just a really trash album, and I don't really have anything else to say about that one. I kind of just want to distance myself from that one. Next up we got Meghan Trainor, Timeless. So just like Jason Derulo, I absolutely despise everything about Meghan Trainor. I genuinely think she's just a very annoying person in general, let alone the fact that this album was genuinely just terrible. My review on this album was a 20, so a 2 out of 10, and my review was, it's ass. What a shocker. So yeah, that's about all I gotta say about that album. Ooh, next up we got Netsped, Badass Effin' Kid. This one was also trash. I don't remember this album, but I remember it sounding like a very, very poorly done Whole Lotta Red. And I'm not the biggest fan of Whole Lotta Red, but after listening to this album, it made me find a new appreciation for Playboi Carti, Whole Lotta Red. So I guess there's one good thing about this album. Oh, next one is This Is Me Now by Jennifer Lopez. I can't find it. Here we go. This album, also very bad. So I decided to watch the movie with the soundtrack, and I couldn't get past 10 minutes. It was that bad. The album also is very bad too. It's just kind of boring. There's no cohesion or anything. It's just a very bland album, and I don't really have anything else to say about that one, mainly because I don't remember much about the album. I just remember it being very bad. Ooh, next up we got Justin Timberlake's album. This one I was actually kind of excited for because I remember liking Justin Timberlake when I was a kid, but honestly it was very bad. I think there was like 1 or 2 songs on here I liked, but the rest of the album was just, it ranged from like 1 good song to the rest being like very bad to just boring. There was no standouts on this album, and this album kind of just came and went. No one really talked about it after like a week. So yeah, that's about it about that one. All right, next up we got Lil Uzi Vert, Eternal Take 2. Now this album honestly pissed me off because I was very excited for this album, and this album went out of its way to prove that Lil Uzi Vert just completely lost his touch. I will say I like Eternal Take. I like it a lot. I thought the album was good. All right, I am a D1 defender of Eternal Take, and I'm a defender of Pink Tape. All right, I think those albums are good, except for Chop Suey cover. That was bad, but everything else I liked about that album, and I liked Eternal Takes. I love Part 2. I think Part 2 is an amazing song, but this was just fuck. This one started out decent, you know. This one pissed me off because it started decent. It started decent with like the first 2 songs. I thought the first 2 songs were pretty solid, and then Meteor Man starts. And it just like it goes up like this, you know. It starts out the first 2 songs like, oh, you know, we're getting good. Boom! It literally tanks so fast that it's just bad after bad after bad after bad, and it was sad. It was so bad that this man has to lie to his fans and say that this wasn't the real album, that the real one's coming soon. By the way, he said this for the past 3 albums. Ooh, time to piss off that fan base. Next up we got Death to Slim Shady by Eminem. This album was very bad. This album was so bad. It felt like an empty shell of Eminem trying desperately to hang on to his life and hang on to his career, just to milk Slim Shady just a little bit more before he really just tanks. Guilty Conscience 2 is literally the only good song on here. That and Fuel, and with Fuel he gets carried so heavily by JID. It's not even funny on how carried he gets from him. The rest of the album ranges from mid to just absolutely dumpster fire. There's nothing good about this album really, outside of those 2 songs. I don't really have anything else to say. It's just a really bad empty shell of what Eminem once was. All right, this one was like one of the final albums I've listened to this year. It's Juice WRLD's Party Never Ends. I actually listened to this with my friend, and honestly I was very, you know, honestly, God, I never thought this album was ever gonna release, to be honest. But yeah, this wasn't it. This wasn't the album that I was promised by them for the past 5 freaking years. You know, 5 years or 4 years, 4.5 years, whatever. 4.5 year promise of an amazing album, and this is it. A bunch of filler songs and like 1 half decent song. Like, come on, bro. It felt very disrespectful and kind of fully tarnished his name, in my opinion, especially for like a finale to a posthumous album series or album run. It's just crazy that, you know, they started out good with Legends Never Die, and then they very quickly became like XXXTentacion's label and just dropped horse crap after horse crap. So yeah, that really sucks. On to the next one, which is Future and Metro Boomin, We Still Don't Trust You. Now this is a sequel to We Don't Trust You, which honestly we will get into far later into this tier list. This album was a very bad sequel. It's weird because like the first album was the first album, and so everyone kind of expected it to be like a lot better, but it just ended up kind of falling flat, to be honest. So that sucks. I can feel the keyboard warriors right now. All right, next one is Loom by Imagine Dragons. Now Loom by Imagine Dragons, I didn't really have any faith. Now Loom by Imagine Dragons is an album that I didn't really have faith in because, to be honest, I thought the lead single Eyes Closed was very boring. I didn't really think it was anything special. It kind of just felt like a stereotypical Imagine Dragons song. And yeah, I wasn't surprised that this album was bad, but I will say I did keep an open mind for it. You know, I wasn't going in with like a bad attitude. I was going in with a positive attitude. I was listening to it with my friend Brett, who is a very big Imagine Dragons fan. And you know, I will admit it is far better than Mercury Act 1 and 2. While that isn't saying much, it is, you know, a step in the right direction. It's better than those albums, and those albums were really bad, and it's obviously far better than Evolved. But outside of like a few great tracks like Don't Forget Me, and I think Fire in these hills, I think that's one of the songs called. For the most part, this album really just ranged from like forgettable to practically unlistenable. So yeah, it's not much, but I will say it's a step in the right direction. Ooh, next up we got Charlie XCX. Or no, that's not Charlie X. My bad. But yeah, next up we got Camila Cabello, XOCXOXO or whatever it's called. I think it had a pretty big marketing, almost like Brat. But yeah, this album was really something. I will say I am a defender of I Love It. I do think it's a very stupid song, but I will say I'll blast it. Like I think it's a pretty fun song. Like it's dumb, but it's fun. The rest of the album is a complete disappointment though. There is not a single good song on here. I think it's a complete mess, and it just doesn't really know what it wants to do. It doesn't know if it wants to be hyper pop. It doesn't know if it wants to be electro. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Very similar to Loom. It is a Frankenstein of a bunch of different genres, and it just doesn't know what it wants to do, and it doesn't have a clear path. It feels like a complete mess, and yeah, that's all I gotta say about that one. Alrighty, next up we got Kid Cudi and Sano. Now, this album, I will say, last year, this album, this was one of my most anticipated albums of this year. All right, because obviously during time, most of these artists hadn't even announced their albums, so all the artists I loved weren't announcing albums. So this was one of the only albums that I had to go off of, hype wise. And this album was claimed by Kid Cudi himself as his magnum opus. This was going to be a game changer for everyone. And it was going to set him apart from his other albums, which it did. I will admit, it did set him apart. But when I listened to his album, I didn't think it was going to be, I thought it was going to be good, because I mean, same guy who made Man on the Moon 1, 2, 3. I thought it was going to be good. And yeah, no, this was trash. It was bad. Genuinely, this killed pretty much almost any respect I had for him. I think that this album was just really bad. Alrighty, next up we got Lyrical Lemonade, All Is Yellow or something like that. I don't really have much to say about this album. I'm just gonna put it at a mid, because it's literally just a bunch of, again, very similar to Kid Cudi, a bunch of YouTube riff instrumentals. It just has songs with artists like Lil Durk and Kid Cudi, Chief Keef and Lil Yachty, Snot and Six Dogs, Babytron and G Herbo, Lil Tracy and Black Cray and Corbin. Like, it's just a bunch of songs that just makes no sense, because there's so many artists that just doesn't make sense to be making songs together. Really boring of an album. And while I don't think it's like the worst thing, while I don't think there's any like really bad songs on here, I don't think there's anything to talk about. Really, it's just a bunch of random rap songs that you could just play in the background just to have as background noise or like white noise, but nothing else. That's it. That's literally about it. That's all I can say about this album. All right, next up we got Lil Sims, Drop 7. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. I really like Lil Sims. I think she's an amazing artist, but I gotta admit, when it's a miss, it's a miss, and this album was a miss, bro. I don't know what she did with this album, but this album was just not as good as her previous, or not album, it's an EP, but it's not as good as her previous work. And maybe she just did it more for fun, I don't know, but it's just very messy. There's a lot of more boring songs on here than previously. If I remember correctly, Far Away was a really good song, but outside of that, like, it was like SOS or Torch or something that I just really wasn't into. Outside of that, like, it's not a bad album, but it's nothing like, there's no standouts on this album, so that's why I have it at a mid, to be honest. All right, next up we got Might Delete This Later by J. Cole. Honest to God, he might as well had deleted this album, because I don't remember anything about it. I just remember that, like, was it like 7-minute drill or something like that, where he did the diss track to Kendrick and then ended up deleting the song and apologizing. This album was a complete filler album. It just had nothing interesting on it, and yeah, while I don't think it's a bad album, I can't give it any higher than a mid. It's just not good, and it's not an album that I've even returned to. There's no songs on here that I put in my rotation, and honest to God, you couldn't pay me to name more than one song off this album outside of the 7-minute drill, and the only reason I remember that is because it's a Kendrick diss track. If it was a diss track to anyone else, I probably wouldn't remember it. I'm gonna be fair with you, I'm losing my voice already, so I'm gonna wrap up this recording. Okay, Hi, I'm back. It's been like 2 days. So before we get into this next mid album, I just want to say, please listen. Just hear me out, okay? The next mid album is The Tortured Poet Department by Taylor Swift. Hear me out. When I first reacted to this album, I did give it a 7.7. All right, I gave it a 7.7. But if you watch that video, you would realize how everything was going wrong in that video. Like, there was construction work happening on my road. My car battery decided to die like midway through the video, so I could barely understand what was happening. So I gave it the benefit of the doubt and I gave it a 7.7, even though I couldn't really understand a lot of the tracks. So I decided to re-listen to the album on my own, and I re-listened to it twice, including the second album. I don't remember what it's called, but it's the one with like the brown cover art. By the way, this counts for both. And honest to God, I didn't really enjoy it. While I do think that there was a lot of lyrically decent moments, I do feel like sonically and the atmosphere of the album compared to previous albums just wasn't really there. It just felt a lot more boring and dull compared to previous albums, and maybe that's just because she was going for more of like an acoustic / poetic route with this album. But for me personally, it didn't hit like her other albums. So yeah, it's just my opinion. Please do not attack me in the comments. I'm sorry. Alrighty, so the next album we got is But I'll Wait For You by Local Natives. Now I will say this one kind of hurt me because I am a lifelong Local Natives fan, but I gotta give it a mid. I have to. It just wasn't that great of an album. I think it's probably their most forgettable album in their entire discography. I just feel like there was nothing there that really showed anything, you know? Like, they were just kind of like whatever tracks. Well, I do think there was like 1 or 2 decent tracks on there. I feel like just for the most part, they kind of just felt lackluster and didn't really do much. They just kind of all felt very samey. So yeah, hopefully their next album isn't like that. Next one we got is, what is it called, this album? Oh, To the Ghost by The Colts, or by Colts. Now this one I was actually really excited to listen to because of the song Gilded Lily that I reacted to like years ago. I didn't know they released this album, so I decided when I found out they released it, I was like, ooh, gotta listen. And yeah, it wasn't really as I expected, because I wasn't expecting it to sound like Gilded Lilies because it's 2 years in the future, but I thought it was going to sound similar. And for the most part, sonically, it sounded similar, but I think that the main issues with this album is that instrumentally, almost every track sounded identical to each other. I will say, though, the positives of this album is her vocals. Oh my god, the vocalization on this album is breathtaking. But outside of that, very similar to the Local Natives album, it's just very, very samey. Like, there's not much going on instrumentally and sonically, but it is cohesive, so I'll give them that. For the first OK album, we got Green Day Saviors. Now, this is an album that I was very excited for last year when it was announced, because all the singles that they had released were great. They were amazing. They felt identical to like very old school, like maybe like 2009 to even like 90s style Green Day, which I was very happy about because it felt like a modernization, like a modernized version of them. But when I saw the track list and saw that all those tracks that they had released for this album were in the front, my biggest worry about this album was whether or not it was going to be very front heavy, and sadly that was the case. Every track in the second half of the album just wasn't that great. I don't think they were bad, and I don't think there was any bad songs per se, but I don't think there was anything that was very like amazing, you know, outside of like the first half. Like, the first half had a lot of amazing tracks, but the second half was almost a complete snooze fest, and it kind of just ruined the album for me. That sucks, but hey, at least it's better than Father of All, so that's a plus. Alright, so next one we got Heartstone Cycle by Don Toliver. Now, I will say, honestly, this album has grown on me a bit. Before it was a mid, but now it's an okay album. I do think that there are a lot of tracks on here that are pretty solid, and some being actually really, really good. But I just feel like there's a lot of tracks on here, a lot of really short tracks that I feel like could be longer and could have a lot more done to them. It's also another album that kind of sounds a bit samey, so that's kind of hinders the album a bit. But I do like his vocalization on the album, and I do like a lot of the production on this album, so I'll give it an okay. It's an okay album, but it's not an album that I ever return to. Alrighty, next up we got The Secret of Us by Gracie Abrams. The best way I can explain this album is it's pretty much like Torture's Poets Department, but less boring. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's the best way I can explain it. I think our vocalization is pretty okay on it, but I will say there are like a lot of pretty damn great songs on here, so that's why I'm putting an okay and not mid. But yeah, I do think she has potential. On to the next one, which is Cage the Elephant's Neon Pills. Where is that? Now this one I was very excited to react to also, and I did. I listened to it, and I thought it was a pretty okay album. I will say that I do think that compared to the songs that I have listened to from them, I do think it's also very samey, and it just doesn't have too much going for it. But I don't think there's actually any bad tracks on here, which can go for a scene with all these albums that aren't okay. Like honestly, the only reason why any of these songs aren't in mid is because I genuinely don't think that there's a bad song on these albums, but it's just the fact that a lot of these songs just sound samey. They don't really have anything very unique to them, and they're just nothing crazy about them. And yeah, that's pretty much what this album is. Pretty much almost every track sounds identical to each other, and I think that there's only like maybe like 1 or 2 tracks on here I actually like really enjoy. No, yeah, almost every track on here is around 60. It's an okay album. There's not really much to talk about with it, mainly because I don't remember the album. Okay, this one might piss off my mom, I'm not gonna lie. But next up we got David Kushner. Fun fact, my mom really likes David Kushner, but I'm gonna be fair with you, this album was very boring, but it wasn't bad. I like his vocals a lot, but it's just, again, same issue with the rest of the albums, very samey. There's not much versatility in this album, not much to talk about with it. Okay, next up we got Dua Lipa, Radical Optimism. I'm gonna be real with you, I don't remember a single song off this album. I'm gonna put it in okay because I gave it a 64 out of 100, which means I could put it in okay, but I don't remember this album. Oh, it's the one with Houdini on it, right? Houdini. Yeah, it's that one, I think. Right? I hope. But yeah, I don't remember anything from this album. I just remember thinking that a lot of the tracks were very boring on here, but I do remember that there wasn't really a bad track on here, or like a track I actually liked or thought was a skip. I just thought there was nothing special about it. So yeah, on to the next one, which is one of the more recent albums that I reacted to on the channel, which was the Smile cutouts, which I think honestly were just outtake songs from their other album Walls of Eyes, which also released this year, because there was pretty much nothing special about this album, and that sucks because it's like this lead singer Radiohead, but it's the truth. I don't think there's a bad song on here, but I don't think there's anything special, you know? Like, I would probably skip a lot of these tracks, so that kind of sucks. But I will say the soundscape of the album is very nice, and the atmosphere is there, and it's very similar to Walls of Eyes, which is why I'm thinking that these are just outtake songs. Ooh, next up we got Ski Mask Slump God 11th Dimension. This one was actually a very long awaited album. This actually had a lot of hype surrounding it, but honestly I thought it was okay at best. You know, there were some cool tracks on here, but I feel like it was kind of messy. You know, it's like what, 20 something songs, and there's like maybe like one song on here that really stands out, and the rest are kind of just like whatever. So as a follow-up to Stokely, it wasn't it. Alright, next up for the first good album. I can't believe I'm saying this, guys, but Boy With You has a decent album. I know, crazy, am I right? The man who was obsessed with making a uke for every single song, he actually made a solid album. Honestly, I thought it was a decent album, you know? It's a pretty good album. I think sonically it's okay. Lyrically, it's pretty solid. I don't think it's anything crazy, you know. I if I remember correctly, I remember the first half of the album being pretty underwhelming, but I do think the second half of the album really carries it and really showed how much potential he had. Barely squeezed him into the good because I only gave it a 70. But on to the next one, which is Yeet 2093 or something like that. Yeah, it's a good album. It's a fun album. It's not an album that I really took seriously, so I'm not like expecting godly lyricism, but it's a really fun album. I think there's a lot of cool instrumental choices on this album, and I will say the moment I heard the Regular Show sample, it hooked me in. I can't deny it. All right, next up we got Beyonce Cowboy Carter. Now, I've re-listened to this, okay, and at first I did not like it. I think I gave it like a 60, but after re-listening it twice, I actually grew very fond of it. I feel like every time I listen to it, it does grow a little bit more, so I wouldn't really be surprised if this album does proceed to go into like the 80s. As of right now, standing at a 7.3. It's a really cool album. Honestly, if she continued doing country, I wouldn't mind it. I would actually be fine with that, because I think she kills it with country too. Yeah, on to the next one. Short and Sweet by Sabrina Carpenter. Again, another very fun album. Not an album that I really took very seriously, because again, it's not supposed to be lyrically anything crazy. But yeah, it's a very fun album. A lot of catchy songs, a lot of catchy riffs, and a lot of catchy melodies. Bottom line, it's just a very catchy album. Ooh, next up we got Empathogen. That's what I'm gonna go with, by Willow. Jesus Christ, her voice is so good. What the hell? Y'all remember that one TikTok where that guy talks about how she kind of goes into like she buries herself in the ground, pops out, drops a banger, goes back into the ground for a few years, pops out again, drops a banger, hibernates again, drops banger, and that's what this is. She just drops a banger. I had a blast listening to this album. Next up is MXM Tune, Liminal Space. Now, the only reason I know about this album is because all the damn TikToks I see from her. She makes so many TikToks, it's not even funny. She made a TikTok about how this album was based off the Backrooms, and the moment she said that, I was hooked, and I listened to it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Like, it's just a really, really good album. All right, but next up, we got Conan Gray, Found Heaven. This is such a good album. Borderline great. Like, no joke. I would argue this is a great album, but I'm gonna put it at good because I put it at 7.8. If it gets put in 8, then I'll put it in great. But I think sonically this album is amazing. It feels like there's so many 80s like aesthetics of like synth pop in this. I love like the influences of like Prince, Queen, Elton John, and I think he does it so well, and I think his voice matches it so greatly. Like, I think he absolutely killed it with this album, and honestly, I'm very shocked this isn't more popular, and I'm very shocked this is as like low rated as it is. But yeah, next up we got American Dream by 21 Savage. Just another really good album. I think that this was an album that a lot of people had a lot of worries about for some reason. I don't know, that he was gonna be like dubbed a featured artist if he didn't do good with this album. But the thing is that I never really considered him a featured artist to begin with, because yeah, he does a lot of features, but also he's dropped a lot of banger albums, so I don't know why there was a lot of worry to this. But honestly, we didn't really have anything to worry about because the album is a banger, and I thought it was a very good album. But I don't think it's his best album. I do think it's a very good album, and there's a lot of cool lines on here, there's a lot of cool songs on here, and I think the production on this album is killer. So yeah, don't know why people were so worried about this album. Makes no sense. Okay, next up we got Linkin Park From Zero, another album that a lot of people were worried about. A lot of people were mad that they got a new singer, but honestly, I wasn't opposed to it. I was open-minded, and honestly, it was a good decision. I think they chose a great singer to sing for them. I think she was probably like the best part about the entire album, because her vocals really carried the album. In all honesty, I think Mike and her carried the album completely. I do think that there's a lot of amazing tracks on here. There were definitely some kind of like boring tracks on here, and tracks that were kind of like, you know, they're like just typical Linkin Park tracks. But there was a lot of cool ideas and cool concepts. It really felt like an album that was just like a merge of all the rest of their albums. But the only reason why I don't put it in great is because of how incoherent it is, because of how many styles they merge in this album, and it does lead for like a very messy listen. Like, it just sounds like I'm listening to their discography on shuffle. But yeah, other than that, I don't mind it. Yeah, next up we got MGMT, Loss of Lice. I'm gonna be fair with you, I listened to this, I think this was one of the first albums I listened to this year. Don't remember it, but I gave it a 7.9, so I must have liked it. But yeah, on to the next one, which is Half Alive Persona. Now, honestly, I'm gonna be for real with you guys. I've been re-listening to this album a lot, and honestly, I might have to change it to great. I might move it up to great later on in the video, but I'll put it for good. You know, I'll put it in good for now. But I will say this one kind of came with a shock with me because this album was really good. Like, I think sonically they killed it, lyrically they killed it, vocally they killed it. They pretty much just killed this album. And while I don't think there's anything like too out of this world, the replayability factor to this album is crazy. But yeah, for the first great album, we have it's not technically an album, it's an EP. It's the Unheard EP by Hozier. Now I do know that, you know, short and or too sweet is a little overplayed now. I'm not gonna deny it. I will say, as someone who only knows this dude from the song Take Me to Church, this EP was very shocking to me, because I always thought he's a one-hit wonder, but honestly, I thought this EP was great. Like, genuinely, I don't even think Too Sweet is my favorite song on here. I think it was like, I don't know if it was like Farewell or Empire Now. I think it might have been Empire Now that was my favorite. No, it was Farewell. Farewell was my favorite song on here. I think sonically this album was great, or EP was great, lyrically great, vocally great. Everything about this EP was great, and I had an absolute blast listening to this. Also, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna put Persona at great too while I'm at it, because why not? I love that album. Ooh, okay. Next up, we got We Don't Trust You by Metro Boomin. We Still Don't Trust You is in bad, and We Don't Trust You isn't great, because it's the truth. We Don't Trust You is such an amazing album. I think they absolutely killed it. I honestly don't know what the hell went wrong with We Still Don't Trust You, because they had everything lined up for this album. So the fact that they kind of, you know, fumbled the second album, just kind of crazy. But yeah, no, this album's great. I loved it. There was not a bad song on this album. I don't even think there was a mid song on this album, to be honest. But yeah, next up we got Doja Cat Scarlet 2. Now, this is technically a deluxe version of Scarlet, but I'll count it because why not? Yeah, honestly, I thought all the songs on this version of the album was just so much better. She freaking cooked on it. I don't know what happened, but she cooked with it. It's crazy. Like, every song on this deluxe is better than every song on the actual album, which is weird, but it's so good. Next up, we got Joey Vance and Bray, No Hands. I thought that was a great album. That was so fun. Very similar to Yeet. I didn't really go in expecting it to be anything lyrically amazing, but honestly, there was actually a lot of really fun lyrics on this album, and I think sonically it's very fun. It kind of gave off like a little bit of a Beastie Boys vibe. Maybe that's just what they were going for, but honestly I think it works very well. And yeah, it's just a great album. I think instrumentally it's great, lyrically great, vocally great. I love the features on this album. I mean, hell, they got Danny Brown on here. That's an automatic W right there for me. Thought that was a great album. Ooh, next up we got a fun one. We got Kylie Uchi. I'm not gonna say the name of the EP or mixtape. I don't know. I think it's an EP. I can't say the name because I can't speak Spanish. But yeah, this EP was amazing. I loved it. This was actually one of the first releases. I think this was literally one of the first releases. But last year I loved her album. I think it was Red Moon and Venus. I loved that. Okay, no, this is an album. I don't know why I thought it was an EP for some reason. I think I heard someone say it was an EP. But yeah, this was a great, absolutely great album. Like, I think her vocals on this album were killer. I love the experimental vibes on this album. I love the vocalization on this album. Like, it's just so cool. It is such a cool album, and it was a great way to start the year. Okay, next up we got Novo Amor Collapse List. Now, this is an album that honestly I really love. Novo Amor. I didn't do a reaction video to this album because I just kind of wanted to, you know, I listened to it on my own and I absolutely adored it so much. I think vocalization was amazing. I think instrumentally amazing, lyrically amazing. It is just a very beautiful indie folk album, and yeah, that's all I really gotta say about that. But on to the next one, which is New World Depression by Suicide Boys. This album was also very great. I do really like Suicide Boys. I do think like this is definitely their most coherent album for me personally. I know them, it's not their highest rated album. I think the last one, Sing Me a Lullaby, is their highest rated, but I do, again, like genuinely, I do think that this is their most consistent project they've ever released since 2015. I would say a lot of replayability factor too with this album. But on to the next one, which is Mood Music by Coldplay. Now I do actually have a signed copy of the vinyl, which I'm very happy for. This album actually shocked me because I was very nervous about this album, because when I listened to Music of the Spheres, that album literally destroyed my love for the band. I'm not gonna deny it. So I wasn't expecting this album to be much better, but honestly I'm very shocked on how much better it was. Obviously I don't think it's rated much higher than Music of the Spheres, but I think it was amazing. Very atmospheric. Like if you like very like orchestraic atmospheric albums, you'll love this. That's all I can say. It is beautiful, very beautiful album sonically. Next up we got Eternal Sunshine by Ariana Grande. Now this is an album that I had so much fun listening to. I think sonically this album was fun, lyrically this album was fun. It was just such a fun pop album. There's a lot of very heartfelt lyrics on here, which I really enjoyed. I think the only song I really didn't enjoy was Yes And, because I feel like compared to the rest of the album, it just didn't really fit, just didn't fit much with the rest of the album. But outside of that, love this album, and I am still considering getting the vinyl for it. Okay, next up we got For Crying Out Loud by Phineas. This album was great. I really enjoyed it. Also got a signed copy of the vinyl and CD, so very happy that I did that. But yeah, very great album. I think sonically it's great, lyrically great, vocally great, and it really helps Phineas kind of like stand out more as an artist, and it really kind of proves that he's not just Billie Eilish's brother and he's his own artist, and he can make amazing music without his sister having to sing it. It also has a lot of replayability factor to it. Ooh, next one's Doshi. We got Doshi in the house. Let's go. But yeah, next one is Doshi, Alligator Bites Never Heal. Definitely gonna be putting this in great. Absolutely love this album. I think Doshi is probably one of the best upcoming female rappers, if not just rappers in general. Honestly, I will say her and Lil Sims are probably my favorite female rappers, but I think she's kind of starting to overtake Lil Sims for me, especially with the recent Lil Sims EP. I don't know, I just still don't really enjoy that EP, but dude, I've been listening to a lot of songs off this album, and again, very high replayability to it. I think the lyricism on it's great. She reminds me a little bit of like Tyler the Creator, which is cool because she also did a song with Tyler the Creator, which I thought was awesome, and I was so happy when they released that song. Also, goated song, by the way. Absolutely love this album, and I think it's such a great album, and honestly it could really, like, for me personally, I think it could go up to like an amazing to me. All right, next up we got Ye Locre, Songs of Origin. But yeah, this is a very great EP. I think sonically this EP is great, lyrically great, vocally great. It's a very I forgot what it's called, a fable. I think it's a fable, that's what they call it. It's like a fable like EP, which is telling a story, and I forgot the story. I looked up the story, I did research on the story, I forgot the story, I apologize. A lot of great tracks on here, very atmospheric when it comes to like that very folklorish aspect and like folkish aspect to it, but it's also like a medieval-esque, which is really cool. That being said, next one is actually Hayfield's EP by Ye Locre. This one is also very good. I really love this. I think instrumentally it's amazing, lyrically great, vocally great, just really shows off their talent and their potential, and it shows it off well, and it shows it off amazingly. So yeah, very happy with these two EPs, and I can't wait to see what they have to offer next. Hi, it's the next day. I got very tired and I couldn't talk anymore, but I will admit I moved some stuff around, so I'm gonna close my camera, and there you guys go. You guys can see all the stuff that I moved around. I moved some albums into the good and some into the okay, because I started thinking about it, and I kind of rethought about some of the albums and what I thought about them, and realized some of them aren't as good as others, and some that are actually better than others. So yeah, this is where we're at now. And also, I did forget about one album, which is Snow Patrol's latest album. I completely forgot about Snow Patrol's latest album. I'm gonna put that in good. I think it's a pretty solid album, and I do think out of the two albums I have reacted to from Snow Patrol, I prefer this one over A Million. I think it's like A Million Suns or something like that. I prefer this one so much more than that one. Okay, next up we got Hasta Vista by Childish Gambino. Now, I actually really like this album a lot. I think it's a great album. I do know that technically it's just like a remaster or like a remake of his 2020 Untitled album, and he just added a few more songs. And yeah, I still like it. I liked it then and I love it now. And then the songs that were added I really do enjoy. So yeah, I don't have an issue with it. I thought it was a great album. Next up we got Rose Rosie. I thought that was a great album. It's a very fun album, very energetic album. Obviously nothing too insane on like the lyricism and all that, but it's a very fun album, and it's an album that honestly, even though I couldn't really see myself returning too much, I do think it is still a great album, and I can see why people absolutely adore this album. Next up we got GMX by Kendrick Lamar. Now originally this was actually one of my highest rated albums of the year, but then I re-listened to it after the hype died down, and I realized it's not as good as his previous album, Mr. Morale. And while I do think it's a great album and it has a lot of amazing songs on it, I do think that the consistency compared to Mr. Morale isn't there, and I do think that a lot of the replayability isn't there. So for that, I'm gonna still give it a great, but I don't think it's the best album. You know, I don't think it's his best album, and I do prefer Mr. Morale. I know that's probably a controversial take, but Mr. Morale is an amazing album. Alright, next up we got Bring Me the Horizon, Post-Human Next Gen. Absolutely love this album. Thought this album was great. I think instrumentally this album's killer. There's a lot of like really cool concepts with this, and it reminds me a lot of like 21 Pilots when it comes to the lore aspect, but even just like the amount of hype that's in this album is absolutely crazy. There's so many cool ideas in it, and there's so many cool like pop metal fusions, and yeah, it's just a really cool album, and I highly recommend you go listen to it if you like metal. And I'm not even one for metal, but I thought it was great. Next up we got the Sable EP by Bon Iver. I'm also going to put that in great. I want to put it in the lower, you know, I'll put it like down there, because while I think it's a great EP, it's still an EP. It's only like 2 or 3 tracks, so I don't want to put it too high on the grade. Next up we got Vince Staple, Dark Times. Now, okay, this album is great. I absolutely love this album. I think this album has a lot of awesome bars in it, and honestly it was my highest rated rap album of the year up until another album came out. Actually, that reminds me, I forgot to react to Lupe Fiasco's and Schoolboy Q's albums. My bad. They're not going anywhere, so I'll react to them next year, promise. But yeah, there's one rap album that, or three rap albums that peaked above Vince Staple. Still a very great album, and it's an album that I actually returned to a lot when it first released. So yeah. Next up we got Halsey, The Great Imposter. I think it's a great album. A lot of people, you know, it's a very controversial album when it comes to the ratings. Some people loved it, some people hate it. I loved it. I thought it was a great album. While I wouldn't say I like it as much as I used to, I do think that while it did shrink on me a little bit, I still think it's a great album, and I do think that it still showed like a lot of cool concepts and ideas, having it kind of go between different eras of music, and while also displaying the childhood trauma and the health issues that Halsey has went through over the years. And yeah, that was cool. I liked it a lot. Also, I'm gonna move Sable to good. For the songs are amazing, but it's just an EP and there's only 3 songs, so I don't know if it could compare to the rest of these albums. The next one is Childish Gambino, Bando Stone, and The Great New World. This album was great. I absolutely loved it. I think instrumentally this album is great, lyrically great, vocally great, instrumentally great. I think it was a great way to end off his era as Childish Gambino. While again, like, also didn't know this, but this is also a very, like, how do you say, like, controversial album. Like, a lot of people either loved it or hated it. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It was messy as hell and very incoherent, but I think that's kind of like where the charm comes from with this album. But yeah, I loved it. Next up, we got Wall of Eyes by The Smile. Now, this is the successor to Radiohead. It's like a spin-off of Radiohead, and while I don't think it's as amazing as any of the Radiohead albums outside of maybe like one or two, I do think it's still a great album. I think it shows a lot of cool ideas. If you like music that's very like ambient like, you'll love this. I will say there are some moments though that feel a little bit dragged, so just keep that in mind, especially if you're not into like very long songs, or songs that have a lot of like ambient moments and not much lyricism. Other than that, still great. Ooh, next up we got St. Vincent. I'm gonna be free with you. I didn't release the video yet. I'm not gonna talk too much about this, all right? So spoilers. Yeah, I thought this album was great. I love her vocals. Her vocalization on this album's crazy good. Highly recommend this album. But I don't want to speak too much of it because I want my reaction to still be kind of a surprise for people. But yeah, loved it. All right, next up we got Haley Hendrickx. I don't know how to say her name, but Seed of a Seed. I absolutely think this is a great album. I don't think it's as good as her first album that she released back in 2018, but I still think it's a great follow-up. Honestly, her first album is one of my favorite albums of all time. I'm not joking, especially when it comes to like the folk aspect or like indie folk music. I think is one of my favorite indie folk albums of all time, if not my favorite indie folk album of all time. But like, this is genuinely like a great follow-up to it. While I don't think it's as good, like it still shows a lot of, you know, a great aspects, great singing, lyricism, hits, amazing storytelling, still hits. Just not as much as the first album, and maybe that could be nostalgia, you know, maybe nostalgia is something that kicked in for it, but for me personally, I don't think it's better than her first album. But yeah, still great option. Highly recommend that album. Alright, so for the first album that I consider amazing, we got Clairo Charm. I absolutely love this album. This actually might be my most streamed album of the year, or at least second most streamed album of the year. Obviously, I don't think it's my album of the year, but I think out of all the albums I've listened to this year, I do genuinely think this has the most replayability. I think sonically it's great. There's so many grooves, so many amazing vocalizations from her. It's such like a homemade album, and you can tell it's like a very homemade album, and it's an album that's just made in her bedroom. It's just a really vibey album, and it's a great album just to listen to while, you know, you're doing stuff around the house or going on a walk or something, or just vibing out, you know, just vibing out, reading a book, listening to music. It's perfect. It's just the replayability factor is just perfect on this album, and that's why I have it in amazing. Next up, we got Magdalena Bay, Imaginal Disc. Now, I'm gonna be for real with you. I have only listened to this twice, so honestly, this could grow on me a lot more, but I do think this album is amazing. I think instrumentally this album's killer. I think lyrically this album's insane. This is an album that, for just like a pop album, it is pretty much unlike anything I've really heard in pop music, and as a concept album, it is wild. Now, I know it's weird, like the way I'm talking about it sounds like it's in my top 10, and maybe it should be, I don't know, but it's an album that I'm definitely going to return to, and it could possibly reach my top 10. Next up for the amazing albums, we got Adrian Lenker's latest album. I'm gonna be for real with you. This album, I didn't do a video on it because it didn't seem like people wanted me to do a video on it or really cared for me to do a video on it. But I will admit, Bright Futures by Adrian Lenker, I cried. All right, I cried a little bit. There was a few songs that I got a little teary, and I'm not afraid to admit that. But it's crazy how just vulnerable her vocals are. You know, it's like the vulnerability of this album is just absolutely bewildering to me. It really, and maybe that's why it just hit me as hard as it did, like emotionally, is just because you can really feel the pain in her vocals. You can feel the vulnerability in her lyricism and in her voice as she's, you know, singing these lyrics and telling these stories. Genuinely just such a beautiful album, and if you haven't already, please, for the love of God, go check that out. It's such an amazing album. Alright guys, we're here officially at my top 10 albums of the year. Are y'all ready for this? So coming up at number 10, we got King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 by Denzel Curry. Oh my god, I love Denzel Curry. I cannot deny it. He is literally top 5 rappers of all time for me, and I am a glazer for him. I do not care. His previous album was my favorite album of 2022. Well, not favorite album, but favorite rap album of 2022. Absolutely loved it. The instrumentals on the album were amazing, and I can't lie, he doesn't miss. That's just the truth. I'm sorry, but yeah, call me a glazer, I don't care. Top 10 easily. Next up, we got, okay, hear me out with this one. All right, this one's a kind of a low-key one. I'm being open about it now. All right, but I will say it's been a few years that I've kept this on the low. And this name of the album is not going to help my case. Keep an open mind for this album. All right, the name of it, just hear me out. So for number 9, we got Suki Waterhouse, Memoir of a Sparkle Muffin. Yep, that's the name of the album. I don't know why that's the name of the album or why she thought of that name, but that is the name of the album, and I can't lie, I absolutely love Suki Waterhouse, and I'm not going to deny it. I've been listening to her for the past few years now. I just randomly heard her while I was listening to a playlist on Shuffle. Ever since, I've been kind of hooked. And yeah, this album was absolutely amazing. I adore her vocals, and I do think she is genuinely one of the most underrated artists of the 2020s, especially. I highly recommend you guys go listen to this album. It's really good, and I do love kind of like the 70s style she kind of has with some of her songs. Like, it's a lot of like different styles in this album, but I really like it. So go check it out. It's really cool. For number 8, this is a wild one because I glazed this band so much. Like, I nonstop talk about them in my videos. But for number 8, we got 21 Pilots Clancy. Now, I can go on and on and on about this album. Okay, I can go on and on about this album, especially Lower Eyes, but I'm not gonna. Okay, I'm gonna keep it short. I love this album. I think lyrically this album's great. I think this is one of their most mature albums since Trench. I think it's a great follow-up to Trench, but I will say I think my only issue with this album is that it feels a little bit clickbaity when it comes to the lore, because this album, even just by the name of the album alone, it is supposed to be the most lore heavy album since not only Trench but just in general. But for some reason, it's only really the first track and the final track that truly are heavily lore related. Even so, excluding the lore and all that, it's still an amazing album, and I love the versatility that they have on this album. But yeah, absolutely love this album. This album is amazing and easily top 10 for me. Next up, we got The Maria's Submarine. Now, this album is very similar to Charm. It has the Charm effect on me, but for instance, this is how my brain works, okay? These are probably my 2 most played albums this year, next to Clancy. But the thing is, Charm, I play during the day. That is my daytime album that I play. But for nighttime, it's Submarine by The Marias. That is easily my most streamed album for like nighttime, just vibing out, playing Minecraft or video games, or just chilling and reading a book or something. It is an amazing album. I love, absolutely adore her vocals on this album. I think her vocals are breathtaking on this album. I love the instrumentals. I love the watery sound to it. It's just such a vibey album, and it's such an amazing album, and the replayability factor is wild on this album. It's just such a beautiful and breathtaking album. But for the 6th spot, we got Chromacopia by Tyler Creator. Now, this was, I think, a surprise drop more so than anything. I think he only released like 1 song, and it was like a week or 2 before the album released. I love this album. I think this album's amazing. I originally gave it I think like a 9.8 out of 10, but it did shrink on me a little bit. I think it only shrunk on me like a few points. I think it went to like a 9.2, but still an amazing album. I love the story behind the album. I love how personal this album feels, but also how like fun it feels too. Like, there's such like a personal story to it, but there's also songs on here that are just really fun to listen to, like Balloon, Sticky, all those type of songs, but also songs like Do I Look Like Him, that are more personal and story driven, and I think it's a very cohesive album and it balances everything very well. So yeah, absolutely amazing album. Alright guys, now we are officially in the top 5, guys. My top 5 albums of the year. So starting right off the bat, in 5th place, we got Porter Robinson's Smile. Now this album was the first album that I listened to from Porter Robinson. It's a artist that, like, I've heard the name. You know, his name has popped up a few times in conversations, but I never really went out of my way to listen to him. So when this album released, I was like, you know what? Why not listen to him? And I did, and oh my god, it's insane on how amazing this album is. I'm not even one to really like this type of like electronic music, but like just everything, like the entire style of this album was so interesting, and it hooked me instantly when I started listening to the first track. So yeah, it's such a cool album. It's such a personal album too. There's so many cool stories and like concepts in this album, and I absolutely love it, and I don't think I could give it any lower than 5th place. So in 4th place, we got Quedeca Scrapyard. Now originally this album was my #1 album of the year. A few other albums released, but then on top of that, I did re-listen to the album, and it shrunk on me just a tad bit. I will admit, it only shrunk on me like 2 points, but like for a mixtape, I'm just gonna call it album because my brain keeps wanting to call it an album. For an album that is supposed to be consistent of just scraps from previous albums, like From Me to You and I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, it is absolutely wild on how consistent this album is, how cohesive this album is, and how high quality these songs sound. Like, it genuinely, like, if he were to just release this as in his next album, no one would have had thought anything otherwise. Like, it just sounds like an album. It sounds like an actual well put together album, and it's insane. These are just throwaway tracks from previous albums, and yeah, that's why I really feel like I can't put this mixtape any lower than top 5. Like, it's just an amazing mixtape. It just really shows that Quad did. Alright, so in 3rd place, we got Brat by Charlie XCX. Now this is another artist that I've always heard the name come up in conversations over the years constantly, but it's not an artist that I just really went out of my way to listen to. So going into this album, I was very skeptical, but I was absolutely blown away with this album. Everything from the sound design, from the lyricism, the vibes, the just epic like club vibe of each track, while also still managing to have songs that, even though they were very like clubby, like they still had pretty meaningful and personal lyricism to it, and amazing vocals, just amazing production and mixing. Like, it is absolutely a amazing album and a phenomenal album. There's a reason why this album is going to be a generational album, and yeah, now we know. And yeah, I'm happy to give it 3rd place, but I will say these next 2 albums, they kind of, they outbeated them, not by much, but just by a smidge. So next up, we got Aurora's latest album, What Happened to the Heart. Now this album was amazing. I absolutely love this album. Just her vocals alone on this album are just absolutely enough to carry this to 2nd place. The vocalization is absolutely phenomenal. Some of the best vocals I've ever heard on an album. I highly recommend you guys go listen to this album. The atmosphere, the soundscape, the lyricism, just everything just is absolutely perfect. There's so many little details in it that are just so amazing. Genuinely just a phenomenal album. Highly recommended. But here we are, guys. We are at the final album, the album of the year. Who is going to be in 1st place? Well, you probably know because we haven't talked about it, and it's one of the biggest artists in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, my album of the year is Billie Eilish, Hit Me Hard and Soft. There you have it. this album was absolutely phenomenal. I think it was an amazing album to continue off from Happier Than Ever. The soundscape was absolutely perfect. The details, the vocalization, the lyricism, everything about this album was just perfection. There is not a single bad song on this album. There's not a single song that I think is bad or I think is mid or isn't good. Every single song on here is just hit after hit after hit, and it's absolutely breathtaking, absolutely beautiful. And yeah, it also has one of my favorite songs of the year on here, which is The Greatest. Now you guys know all my favorite albums of the year, my least favorite albums of the year. Yeah, as you guys can see, this is my ranking. There it is, my ranking for this year. Honestly, I'm very happy with this. There might be some albums I would change around. I don't know, maybe, who knows, but yeah, I am pretty happy with this list. I'm sure people are gonna get mad at me for a lot of this albums that are put here especially, but yeah, again, these are just all my opinions. If you like these albums, please go enjoy them. I can't wait to see what you guys think about these albums. By the way, if you guys do want to rank all these albums yourselves, you guys can click the link in the description. You guys can actually go and do this tier list yourself if you're interested. You don't have to, but you can, and if you want, you guys can send them to me on Discord, your rankings and all that, which I think will be cool. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for joining me in this tier list video. I can't believe we got to do this again. I'm definitely gonna have this be a yearly thing. Next time, I don't know, maybe we'll do it by release date. It depends on how many albums we listen to next year. Yeah, let me know what other tier list I should do. Let me know what else I should react to, and let me know what else you guys want to see on the channel. Again, I do just want to say thank you guys so much for all the love and support you guys showed over this year. It's been absolutely insane, with the amount of artists in general who have recognized me, like Yellow Gray, who released the Hayfield EP and Songs of Origin. You got Gigi Perez, who created Sailor Song. Yeah, like it's crazy how cool of a year this has been. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much. But yeah, other than that, for the final time this year, I do hope you guys have an amazing day, night, evening, wherever you are, and I'll see y'all next year. Peace.